Hey folks, welcome back. So today we got to talk about the sentencing of old Sarah Boone. You probably saw, but a couple days ago, Boone was sentenced to life in prison. That's life. That's what all the narcissists with baseball bats say. Oh, the fact that she got life makes the decision to turn down the manslaughter plea deal, which would have had her home in 8 years, officially the dumbest decision I've ever seen regarding a court case. You know when someone does something really dumb and they kill themselves, they get nominated for a Darwin Award because they removed themselves from the gene pool? I feel like Sarah should be nominated for a Justice System Darwin Award for turning down the plea deal. That's where you make a decision so dumb you remove yourself from the freedom pool. What do you think? I think that could be something. Gain some traction. Another funny thing about turning down the plea deal is it's not like it was ever in question that Sarah did it or caused it. It's not like she was on the other side of the state going, "You don't understand. I wasn't even there. They're trying to pin something on me that I didn't do. And out of pure human principle, I will not admit to something that I didn't do. I didn't have anything to do with it." Sarah, you're admitting that you zipped him up into the suitcase, didn't help him. When he tried to help himself, you hit his hands with a baseball bat while crying out, "Stop doing this to me. Why are you doing this to me?" And it's too much for your ego to have the whole thing chalked up as manslaughter? But that kind of sums Sarah up, right? The complete and total mind-boggling inability to take any blame or responsibility for anything. And another thing I've been thinking about since the trial, at least according to Sarah, who knows if it's true, but at least according to Sarah, their first date, George and Sarah's first date consisted of George breaking her phone, hitting her, holding her captive on her back porch in the fetal position for so long her back hurt, and threatening to sodomize her. That was their first date, and we know how the relationship ended. Fortunately, as we know, relationships some end really tragically like this, but I've never heard of one that ends tragically but also starts this bad, and I think it's safe to say that George and Sarah are in the running for the worst love story of all time by Nancy Brophy. All right, so let's get into the sentencing remarks. That's why we're all here. Sarah's sentencing remarks were in the back half. George's family's read impact statements. It was rough. I could barely even get through his mom's statements, but then it was finally Sarah's turn. Her remarks were broken up into 3 different sections. The first one was she read a written statement. She said it was an edited version, but it still took her almost 15 minutes to read. And so the written statement, and then after she read that, she did what she calls an apology, and with that one, she just spoke from the cold heart. And then the last part was her lawyer asked her to talk about how she's rekindled her relationship with the Lord. And so the first chunk, the written part, in Sarah's head, she structured it as a list of people and things that she forgives. She's on this big forgiveness kick now. So that's what it was in her head. What it really is just Sarah bitterly lashing out and saying all of the things she thought she should have been able to say during the trial, but couldn't because of things like relevancy and evidence and stuff like that. And so she took that opportunity to be like, "I forgive the Torres family for not doing something to stop me from torturing and murdering George. I forgive George, who was a monster." So that's the kind of the way it read. One thing that I forgot to talk about was at the beginning of Sarah's written section, the I forgive all of you for not stopping me from doing this section, she invoked the wisdom of Ken-2 Sukuroi. And I feel like you could hear an audible eye roll from the whole courtroom when she got into it. Like, really, Sarah, you're going with the Ken-2 Sukuroi thing? And what Ken-2 Sukuroi is when a ceramic pot breaks, you fix it using gold, which embraces the flaws, and the end result, a new beautiful piece of art emerges. And so she started the whole thing with a metaphor about how through all of this, Sarah has emerged a new beautiful piece of art that embraces her flaws. Wow. Whoa. Another thing I was thinking of since I recorded the first part is, if this wouldn't have happened and Sarah and George were still together, probably at some point Sarah's son would have asked Sarah, "Mommy, what did you and George do on your first date?" We went and played miniature golf and got ice cream. It was beautiful. Anywho, how's your homework going, kid? Sarah's one of my favorite types of bad writers because she is supremely confident she's a good writer, so she really goes for it. There's no self-consciousness in her writing, but she makes the same mistake a lot of bad writers do, which she's convinced good writing is just jamming as many eloquent, impressive words into a terrible sentence as possible, and then voila, there you go. Good writing. Man, I'm a good writer, but it just sounds terrible. Like sentences like, "My apology is profuse and ceaseless," or "My opportunities to be given a fair, proper, and unfluenced, successful conclusion was heavily depleted and poisoned." Like, Sarah's the type of writer to use prior to instead of before. Prior to, I'm a good writer. And so who did she forgive? She forgave the Torres family for essentially being monsters, according to her, and raising a monster in George and not doing anything to stop her from doing this. She forgives George for doing all of the things that her and her lawyer attacked George's character for during the trial. She reiterated that. She forgives all of us on social media that unfairly made her into a pariah and, like I said, poisoned her ability to have a successful conclusion or whatever she was trying to say with that one. She forgives herself. She forgives the justice system, the scoundrel detectives. It was all the scoundrel detectives' fault. They tricked me. Thought that was funny. Imagine the face of the detective. I'm sure she was watching the sentencing somewhere at the part when she was like, "I forgive the scoundrel detectives." And it just came off as one big, delusional, bitter woman up there doing her final, it's the last time anyone has to listen to this lady or care about anything that she says. And can't imagine, and I really do think that she was stunned that the jury found her guilty as charged. And I think she was stunned again when the judge read the sentence for life. I think she thought she was going to get up there and read her statement. And at the end, she was like, "Humbly in my soft-spoken voice, I say this." I think she thought she was going to go up there with that tone. "My soft-spoken voice, I'm the abused." One of her last points was, "What if I would have been the one that died? Would I have been a celebrated mother?" I always think that's funny, the argument of, what if the thing that didn't happen happened? Huh? What then? I don't know, Sarah. No one has thought about that because this is the situation that's happened. And Sarah really forgave herself for a while about not leaving. She said, I wish I would have taken my own life in my own hands and left earlier and all this stuff. And one of the most interesting things about the whole thing is Sarah doesn't realize she couldn't leave. One, she's codependent. And two, she has this delusion that she's an impressively high-functioning adult. And in order to have that delusion work, she has to be with someone, but be with someone that's not going to make her feel like she's blowing it because they're more high-functioning than she is. That's why she was so unhappy before she left her ex-husband, because compared to her ex-husband, she was tanking in every possible category that you can tank in. And so her self-esteem went through the floor because compared to her ex, everything that she did, she just felt like she was coming up short. So she talks about how horrible George is and he's a monster and that he ruined her life and the Torres family ruined her life and everything. But as wild as it sounds, George actually checks all of the boxes that Sarah needs for the whole thing to work. Like, she needs somebody. You'd have to date a violent alcoholic if you're Sarah, because if you weren't a violent alcoholic, it would be impossible to date Sarah. So that checks that box. And then she almost needed someone that depended on her, which, again, that's not easy to find once you've fallen as far down as Sarah was fallen, because you really could have made a better argument for battered spouse for George. It was Sarah's car. At any moment when she was in her car alone, she could have just driven off and left. And also, not too many people that are in abusive relationships have their ex-husband's house a minute or two away, and he wasn't thrilled about it, but he had said he's fine with if they were in a violent altercation. He was all right with Sarah coming over and sleeping there. And then it gets into financial. That's like the one little thing that Sarah was holding over George, is she got the $1,000 a month from the divorce. And so she could hold George captive of a roof over his head. I mean, technically, he could have gone back and lived with his parents or his family, but once you're into addiction, as far as George, it's hard to go, I need somewhere to, hey, parents, I need somewhere to live, but then how do you drink all day without, he was lying to his parents saying, no, the drinking's getting better, I'm working on it and stuff, so it would have really highlighted how bad it was going. And so he was stuck, the roof over his head, the food, but also his they were both, really in the throes of alcohol addiction. And so if he leaves Sarah, the craving and need part of the addiction cycle would have been coming up quick. And what's he going to ask his family for? And so in a lot of ways, George was the one that was trapped. He didn't have any money. He didn't have a car. He didn't have an ex that allowed him to come over and stay the night if it got bad. He didn't have enough money to keep his addiction going. And so probably even subconsciously, he thought he couldn't leave. And so, like a lot of things that Sarah flips in her mind, this situation is almost the total opposite than the case that they tried to put forth. And I mean, it's hard to almost explain. It's like so intricate, but it makes sense to me why she couldn't leave George. She's just a codependent, and he checked all the box that fit into her bizarre lifestyle. All right, where am I at? Let's see if I got anything else. This one might be a short one. It's like, what else do I got to say about this lady? All right, folks, I think that's it. I'll see you next time. We're definitely going to talk about the CEO the insurance company CEO that got shot in Midtown Manhattan. I've been following that one very closely. How wild is that? But that's coming up next. I'll see you next time. Why? Steven Y. Shamita.